The A-10 Warthog is famous as a gun with an aircraft built around it. And in Gundam, we kinda have a similar case with the YMS-16M Xamel. This massive mobile suit, if you can even call it that, was made by Zeon engineers with one goal in mind: mounting a giant 680mm cannon. Or Kanone, because the Zeons like their German. But whether you want to pronounce it in English or in German, this would be one of the largest caliber guns mounted on a mobile suit ever. And to give you an idea of just how long this gun was, during transport it was folded up and stored on the Xamel's back. And it was still taller than the Xamel. In fact, we don't even know how tall the Xamel itself is because we only know its total height, which is the height of the cannon when it's stored, which is 27 meters by the way. To fire then, the lock on the back skirt is released, the barrel folds up, locks into place, and congratulations, you can now hit targets up to 50 kilometers away, as long as the Xamel receives targeting data from allied units. And if need be, it could also fire its cannon horizontally for more direct fire, like a mobile suit standing in front of it. Although it should go without saying that this wasn't the Xamel's main intended goal. Its main targets were more fixed, like enemy bases. But what if the enemy mobile suits decided to bring the battle to the Xamel? Well, in that case, it still had some tricks up its sleeve. The first was a 20mm Vulcan gun installed on the right side of the chest. This thing wasn't super deadly, but it was more than enough to intercept missiles and deter mobile suits. A bit more powerful then was the A-Tube multi-magazine missile launcher installed on the left shoulder. These missiles could be fired one by one, or they could all be fired at once to form a barrage. And if all else failed, it could also just resort to pure brute force. With all of this weaponry and armor to protect it, the Xamel was a very heavy mobile suit. But thanks to the expertise that the Zeon engineers had gained from working on mobile suits like the Dom, the Xamel was actually super fast and relatively agile. The legs of the Xamel were not designed for walking. At best, they looked like they could shuffle a bit for like moving out of a hangar or something. Instead, they were equipped with hovering units using thermonuclear jet engines. And this same system was installed on the skirt armor. This gave this 121-ton flying gun emplacement a maximum speed of 220 kilometers an hour. Why is this thing faster than my Civic? Anyways, because the Xamel was meant to be used on Earth, and especially in desert-like areas, the hovering units were fitted with air filters, also used on the Dom Tropen, and dust covers on the joints. So, we have a heavy mobile suit with high speed and thick armor. Its second option to deal with enemy mobile suits was to straight up ram them. But it also had a secret third option. Even though it wasn't equipped with a beam saber, according to the official 0083 website, it was somehow able to use them. And while at first the thought of this thing using a beam saber might sound pretty ridiculous, it does have a maximum speed of 220 kilometers an hour. It just has to hold out the beam saber and let its speed do the rest. And that wasn't the only handheld weapon that we see the Xamel using. Outside of the 0083 anime, we see the Xamel dual-wielding Zaku machine guns in the 0083 Hero of Stardust manga, and in this illustration, it's holding what appears to be a beam machine gun. But we'll get back to these images at the end of the video. For now, let's talk a bit more about two distinct features of the Xamel's armor. First up are these binder-like side armors that really stick out. It's not entirely certain what their purpose is, but it's most likely there to provide extra protection for the cannon. Even though it only covers a little bit of the cannon, whether it's stored or deployed, but I guess a little protection is better than no protection. And the second thing is that giant skirt armor. I already mentioned that it's outfitted with hovering units, but it also serves two more purposes. It absorbs some of the recoil when the cannon is fired, and it also stores extra ammunition for both that cannon and the missile launchers. Moving on to the cockpit, which was again shaped by the cannon. Now, it did use the standard cockpit implemented by the United Maintenance Plan, but it still ends up looking pretty unique. For example, it's a two-seater rather than a one-seater. During normal operations, the Xamel would be controlled by two pilots, a driver and then a gunner with extra controls and even an extra monitor dedicated purely to firing the cannon. But if the situation required it, all controls could also be redirected to just one of the pilots. A fun thing in the schematics then is that it looks like the rail for the mono-eye is just like inside of the cockpit, but in reality, this rail is hidden behind a panel, so the mono-eye isn't gonna knock any of the pilots when they're moving around in the cockpit. As for the actual production numbers of the Xamel then, this is largely shrouded in mystery. It's commonly believed that it never left the prototype stages, and that only 3 units were produced late into the 1-year war. Whether or not they saw any action during the war then is another question entirely, and most of the accounts that we do have take place after the 1-year war. So let's go over these accounts in chronological order after a brief word from today's sponsor, NordVPN, the premier VPN service that helps you not just dodge all those pesky region locks, but also gives you extra protection while browsing online. And if you don't have Nord yet, by using the code kkrt or the link down below, you'll not just get a sweet discount, but you'll also be supporting the channel. In the Vanishing Machine manga, we get the one Xamel story that takes place during the 1-year war. It is November 11th, one day after Operation Odessa officially ended in decisive victory for the Federation. But just because the battle was officially over, it didn't mean that fighting in the area was actually over. While many Zeon forces were able to escape into space, many were still stuck on the ground, forced to make a fighting retreat. And one of these retreating units was a lone Xamel. Unfortunately for the crew though, it wouldn't make it very far. Due to a mechanical failure, the hovering system could not generate enough lift, and rescue was also out of the question. The Federation was aggressively pursuing Zeon, making it impossible for any rescue aircraft to make a safe landing anywhere near them. They were on their own, desperately trying to fix the hovering system while also taking out Federation troops that got close to them. Thanks to the range of the main cannon, they were able to safely take out the Federation tanks before they had a chance to fire back. Because of this, the battle lasted well into the evening, and the Xamel crew was finally beginning to make some progress on fixing the hovering unit. But they weren't the only ones making progress. After yet another failed attack, a different Federation unit suddenly appeared on the horizon. A gun tank 2, also known as a Mammut, German for mammoth. Unlike the Type 61 tanks, the gun tank 2 could get within firing range and immediately began bombarding the Xamel. This then created an opening for a lone Humvee to approach it, allowing Sergeant Hefner to take out the monstrous mobile suit with a single well-placed bazooka round to the cockpit. This action earned him the Federation Silver Cross. For our next story then, and all following stories, we already go beyond the 1-year war. In the Gundam 0081, The Wrath of Varuna manga, a Xamel briefly appears, and when I say briefly, I do mean briefly. It appears to fire a single shot and is then never seen again. The third story takes place on December 4th, Universal Century 0082. But rather than featuring a full Xamel, it only features a Xamel cannon, here nicknamed the Spectre's Bullet. And the way it was used was also very different. The Spectre's Bullet was mounted on a base, and it would be operated by a team of 3 Zeon remnants who used it to carry out several terrorist attacks around Von Braun City. The team consisted of the Zaku F2 rangefinder type, piloted by someone nicknamed the Professor, the Zaku gunner type piloted by Sergeant Major Francie Bardot, and a Gelgoog Jäger piloted by Sergeant Tug. The rangefinder was a slightly modified Zaku F2, with the main modification being that it had an extra sensor attached to the head, which was then linked to a powerful handheld rangefinder. This allowed him to spot faraway targets, whose targeting data was then passed on to the rest of the team. To get around faster, it was usually equipped with rocket boosters, and it also got the Goof Customs Gatling gun. Because this machine was running around trying to spot enemies, it was the most likely to be drawn into a fight, so it needed something to defend itself with. And when transporting the Spectre's bullet, the base could be mounted onto the rangefinder's backpack. The Zaku gunner then got some more drastic modifications, because its entire goal was just to fire the cannon. The right leg was outfitted with tank treads to absorb the recoil of the cannon, its mono-eye sensor was completely reworked, it got a special mount for the cannon on its right shoulder, and it also had a new shield that looks like it was made out of the hull of a battleship. These modifications made the gunner unsuitable for normal mobile suit combat, but it did get some extra weapons for some level of self-defense. Mounted on the left leg was a 3-tube missile pod, and on the side skirt were 2 Sturmfausts. And when transporting the Spectre's bullet, the cannon would be folded up and stored on the left side of the backpack. And finally, the least modified of the three was the patched up Gelgoog Jäger. Other than being a fixer-upper and having a different paint job, it looks pretty much identical to a standard Gelgoog Jäger, but there are some differences in terms of its equipment. In the story, we only see it using a knuckle shield, and it also never uses the built-in beam spot guns, hinting that maybe these were broken and never fixed. The Robot Spirits figure does come with a beam machine gun, but again, this is not used in the story. As for its role, because the Gelgoog Jäger was an excellent sniper machine, it would be in charge of processing the data from the rangefinder, crunching the numbers, and then telling the gunner where to aim. Also, it could carry an ammo canister on each arm, containing 6 rounds for the Spectre's bullet. This arrangement would work out pretty well until they decided to attack Anaheim Electronics' Livermore plant. By now, the Federation was on high alert, and they were taken out by the GPO-0 Blossom. The third story, then, is a story that most of us are familiar with. On October 13th, Universal Century 0083, Xeon remnants attacked the Torrington base in Australia to capture the GPO-2 and its accompanying nuke. And part of this attack was a Xamel piloted by Bob. As an artillery piece, it was extremely effective and was able to inflict heavy damage upon the base. And even when the fighting later on turned into more close combat fighting, it was still not to be underestimated. It was eventually taken out, but not without accomplishing its mission, buying enough time for Annabelle Gatto to escape with the captured GPO-2. In the 0083 Rebellion manga then, we would again see just the Xamel's cannon making an appearance. The second part of Operation Stardust consisted of another colony drop onto the Earth. And of course, Xeon knew that the Federation would desperately try to stop this drop. So at the most likely place of attack, they positioned a bunch of custom Hilldolfers and a single Xamel cannon operated by a single Zeta. The setup here was similar as with the Zaku gunner, but other than not having a shield, the Zeta looks like it was unmodified. And finally, a Xamel would appear in the Gundam Advanced Operation PC-98 game. The story here takes place in UC 0089, and according to the description, this Xamel is equipped with a 360mm cannon instead of a 680mm cannon. Also, at some point, it gets upgraded to the Xamel L-type, but it's unknown what exactly the differences are. And that's the last time the Xamel or any of its parts were seen. But this is not yet where this video ends. Earlier in the video, I said that I was going to come back to these images of the Xamel dual-wielding Zaku machine guns and wielding that B machine gun. Is there anything you notice about the Xamel in these images versus the Xamel from the anime? It looks a bit different, doesn't it? And that's because in these images, it's an earlier design of the Xamel back when it was still in development, and back when it also went by a different name, the Merser und Kanone. And a quick side note here, I believe that Merser is a misspelling of Mörser. Kanone is German for cannon, but Merser is not a German word. Mörser, on the other hand, is German for mortar. So, Merser und Kanone would be German for mortar and cannon. A very descriptive name for the Xamel. But so, the Mörser was designed by Hajime Katoki and would then be cleaned up by Hirotoshi Sano. And apparently, one of the main concerns was reducing the amount of lines to make it easier to animate. I don't know why the name was changed, but in Japanese, Xamel is formed by rearranging the letters from Mörser. And once you know what to look for, it's actually really easy to tell the Mörser apart from the Xamel. The Mörser does not have dustproofing on the legs, it has extra spikes on the sides of the shoulders, the outside of the cockpit is completely different, the missile launcher is made up of individual tubes rather than a box, and the arms are more Zaku-like, including actual hands, versus the three-fingered simplified hands of the Xamel. And this last thing could be important when it comes to its ability to wield other weapons. For the Mörser, it shouldn't have any problems using standard Zaku weaponry, because it's basically using standard Zaku hands. But for the Xamel with its simplified hands, this could be an issue. Although, according to the Robot Spirits figures, it should be able to. And the Mörser also has a few more tricks up its sleeve that may or may not be present in the Xamel. For example, we've got some really detailed illustrations on how the Mörser's cockpit opens up, and how the middle part of the front skirt armor folds out to form a ladder to that cockpit. Now that is some really cool attention to detail. But so, officially, the Merser und Kanone does not exist in universe. Personally though, I do like the idea of the Mörser being an early paper-only design that then got refined into the Xamel, kinda mirroring how it went in real life. But yeah, let me know down below which version you prefer and why. I think I actually like the Merser und Kanone a bit more because of the different cockpit, and also the fact that it has normal hands that can definitely use normal Zaku weapons. But that has been all for this video on this massive mobile suit. Don't forget to check out NordVPN with the code kkrt or the link down below. As always, a big thank you to the Patreon supporters. I hope everyone watching has a great day, and I'll see you all next time.